Hey everybody, how's it going? Today's video is going to be the first in a series of videos I'm going to make about what it was like growing up in the 80s. So my years in the 80s were the years when I was a really young kid. I didn't turn 10 until 1991. I'm going to talk about what it was like being a kid in the 80s. So tonight I'm going to focus on 81 through 84. And this is going to be kind of general because those are only the years that lead up to when I was 3. So pop culture stuff is definitely one of the things I remember from that time period. I remember my mom was a waitress at a bar called Quackers, and they had the Pac-Man game there, like the tabletop Pac-Man. I remember that, and I thought it was so cool. I really didn't understand how to play it, that's for sure, but I thought that was so cool. Another thing that was huge that I actually remember from that time period was E.T. E.T. was everywhere. I remember having this E.T. finger that you would put over your finger, and then when you pressed on stuff, it would light up. It was way too big for me, I remember that. And it was made for kids, but it was huge. Also, Star Wars was everywhere still. So when you're a kid, when you grew up in the 80s, the kids that were born in like 79 and 80 were really into Star Wars. Us kids that were born past 1980, we weren't as influenced by Star Wars. I mean, some of us were, but in general, the kids I knew that were born in 79 and 80 were way into Star Wars. And then the kids that were in my grade and a grade younger than me, not so much. Another thing I remember from that time period is Eddie Murphy was big. I remember Beverly Hills Cop was huge. So movies wise, I saw Neverending Story at the movies. Karate Kid was big. Police Academy was huge. Because the dude in Police Academy that made all the sounds, I thought that was so cool when I was a little kid. There were also those Star Trek movies. That was happening. Leonard Nimoy as Spock in the movies was going on when I was a kid. And it's funny, I lived in a musician household, and my dad had cable TV and watched MTV all the time. And this is like right when music videos were starting. I remember he had a wired remote to the TV so he could turn it up when it was music he liked, or turn it down, or change channels or whatever. But the TV remote actually had a wire. Another thing that was going on when I was a kid in this early 80s time period was space. Like the first woman in space, Sally Ride, and astronaut stuff was everywhere. Space was big. Ronald Reagan was the president, but I didn't really think much about it. I guess because I was still so young. I was more into like what movies and what music I was hearing. So let's talk about music for a little bit, because I remember Cyndi Lauper was really popular. Michael Jackson was like the biggest deal. I remember having a glove for one of my hands like Michael Jackson. Thriller was out and I thought it was scary. And also Beat It came out and I thought it was so cool. That's when Beat It came out, that's when I had the glove, I think. The Ghostbusters song. The Ghostbusters song was a big deal. One that I really remember because my dad was a musician was I Just Called to Say I Love You. In my house, one staple artist that always got played on the record player was Stevie Wonder. So I remember being real little, I Just Called to Say I Love You. You know, that song was the one that was actually on the radio that I had heard at home. So another funny thing I remember about music when I was really little is that like hip-hop was starting to get referenced, but there wasn't a radio station yet, I don't think. Like Black Dudes in Movies, it was starting to move away from like 70s funk and into hip-hop. Black Dudes in Movies would have like tracksuits and like a boombox, like that kind of stuff. That was when I was real little, before I really got what hip-hop was at all. So toys. Toys is a funny one. In the really, like when I was really little, a lot of toys were like hand-me-downs from the 70s. I don't know what, but like, it seems like a lot of stuff was orange and like dark red still. Whatever that means. I had Lincoln Logs, look that one up. And when I was real little, I had the bigger version of Legos, Duplo blocks, like toy racetracks with little cars that would go around. That kind of stuff was already out. He-Man was huge. I had a He-Man action figure even when I was really little, and the girls had My Little Ponies. Also Cabbage Patch Kids, like girls had Cabbage Patch Kids. And Strawberry Shortcake. Here's a weird one that I distinctly remember. There was this dog that was a xylophone, but when you pulled the dog, it would like ding dong, ding dong, like it played itself. There were also Little People play sets. It was like these, they were almost like blocks, but they were in the shape of people. They had like a farmhouse and that kind of stuff. There's still a lot of farmhouse toys when I was little. Urban and rural weren't so separated yet. And also it's because I grew up in a town outside of Dallas. I wasn't in the country, but I wasn't in Dallas. I was right between the two. It was already urban here, but just right down the street would be a farm, and then you go to Main Street and there'd be businesses, and then down the street the other way there'd be a farm. Up until the late 80s, early 90s, there were still farms everywhere. One that I got when I was a kid that I loved was a glowworm. It was like a green worm stuffed animal, but when you squeezed it, it would light up. It had a light, basically had a flashlight inside of it. Loved that. Oh, and Fisher Price tape player and Fisher Price record player. So my mom would record a book for me to listen to on a tape. She would hit a bell where I was supposed to turn the page. And so like when she was gone to work or something, I would have my Fisher-Price tape player and I would literally listen to tapes of my mom reading me the books, and I would like, read along and look at the pictures and wait for the bell sound and turn the page. So the Fisher-Price tape player and also the Fisher-Price record player. I remember thinking like, why do I have tapes but my parents have all these cool records? And then I got a record player for my birthday, I think it was. Fisher-Price record player all the way, man. And there were Matchbox cars everywhere, G.I. Joes. Every kid's room had like a cardboard box with like Matchbox cars and G.I. Joes and random Legos. And Tinker Toys and Lincoln Logs were like the leftovers from a generation gone by, like the wooden toys that they had in the 60s and 70s. Tinker Toys, basically we would make little guns, little fake guns with, and Lincoln Logs, you would just build a house, basically. Another one I remember was the Snoopy Clock that had the shapes that you could, like each number on the clock had a shape. So like one might be a triangle, and you would put the numbers on the clock in the order they went. So it was a cross between teaching you shapes, teaching you numbers, and teaching you to read a clock. So the Snoopy Clock, I remember that. That was from when I was way young. Care Bears was starting to come out, but I think girls were more about Barbies and Cabbage Patch Dolls, and maybe My Little Pony or Strawberry Shortcake. I think Strawberry Shortcake was really the one. So, but I remember the time period. Everything was so neat to me. I was a little kid. I don't have like a vivid recollection of every minute or anything like that, but like being a little kid was great. Or you could play in a closet or a cardboard box or anything like that, and it was awesome. I was doing it in that time period where there was Indiana Jones was coming out, Gremlins, Ghostbusters, Karate Kid. There was a lot of really fun stuff to play pretend when you're a kid in that time period. It's pretty amazing. Another interesting thing that was around everywhere in the toy boxes was cowboys and Indians. You don't really see that anymore. You still see the little green army men, and it was just like those little green army men, but you would like go out in the dirt and like set up the cowboys and the Indians like in like battle positions, and then you could like pretend, or else you could just basically make a diorama. I had both. I played with all of them. I didn't really think of cowboys or Indians as good or bad, or the soldiers. I would just set them all up and have a good time. It wasn't, what it all meant was not even on my mind. That's an interesting thing that just occurred to me as I'm talking. Oh, Scooby-Doo. Scooby-Doo, Scooby-Doo, Scooby-Doo. Forgot all about Scooby-Doo. I loved Scooby-Doo when I was a kid. I always watched Scooby-Doo. Oh, and that reminds me, also there was like, there was Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th, and like I didn't see those movies yet, but I was already aware that those like evil characters existed. So that's interesting to think about. The things that I really remember that set those years apart from other years is like He-Man was big, and Star Wars was big, E.T. was big, and that stuff was like, it was mainstream at that time in my life. Music videos were new, and they were able to portray the musicians as cool. Like I could tell that Cyndi Lauper and Michael Jackson were supposed to be cool. And movies seemed so cool and like mysterious, like Neverending Story, Ghostbusters, Indiana Jones. I was in the process of growing from being a baby to a toddler to a kid when all that stuff was brand new. It was a really cool time to be that age, and I'm sure if you ask people that were adults during that time period, they would have a completely different take on it, but for me, as a little kid during that time, it was neat. This has been 1981 through 1984. This is part one of a series. I'll probably do 85 and 86 as one video, and then 87 through 89 as another video. Those are definite like milestone time periods in my life. So if you've got any questions about 81 through 84 or the 80s in general, then leave them in the comments, and if you lived through these times like I did, let me know what it was like for you. For me, it was just a fun time. My eyes were opening to the world. Anyway, that's my part one of what it was like to be a kid in the 80s. I'm Bird Snake. Thanks for watching. Hey everybody. Hey everybody, how's it going? Hey everybody, how's it going? So I didn't turn 10 until 1990 or 1991. Let's see, 81, 82, I turned